with the recording switched on. So welcome everyone to our weekly call. A couple of things that we're going to cover off this week on the call. Let me share my screen so you can see what we're going to talk about. Right, so that should work, yeah. So firstly, because we've got a conversation coming up with Kenji next Monday at the revised time of 10 a.m. UTC, given he's in Tokyo. I'm going to run through the questions that we have and just really take the opportunity to prompt you to see if there's anything else that on reflection you think has been omitted from the list and should be added, because we can definitely do that then. And then just highlight a couple of recent developments and talk about a couple of things coming up in the next week, which will be of interest. And I can see that Pat has flagged in the chat as well that there's a mask BOF today, which is going to be quite relevant to one of the things I'm going to be talking about. So that's very timely. Thank you, Pat, as I hadn't spotted that. So it's a very timely thing to highlight. So let me kick off. And yes, sorry, and I will send out an updated invite to move the calendar invite for next week from 4 p.m. to 10 a.m. So you have that as a reminder. Appreciating for those of you in certain parts of the world, that might not be the most attractive time of day. But it, as always, will be recorded in the event that you can't make it. So without further ado, I'm hoping this will be legible on your devices. What I'm going to do is just run through these briefly in case there's anyone that can't see the questions. Really, I just want to take the opportunity to say, is there anything else that, as I run through this list, and I've got a similar list for Private Prefetch Proxy, anything that you feel needs to be added, or any of these that need to be tweaked before we run through them with Kenji next Monday. If I run through them, if anyone's got any questions, observations, etc. on any of these, please raise your hand or put comments in the chat, and I'll pause at the end and then just see if there's anything else that you think has been completely overlooked that should be added as well. So in the order that they're displayed, firstly is the ECH deployment in response to consumer demand. What are the deployment plans for ECH across different platforms, e.g. mobile, desktop apps, etc.? And is ECH support being added to Chromium, or is it specific to the Chrome browser code? Does Google intend to support ECH on their cloud platform? And are there plans to support ECH on Linux or Linux? What version of ECH is being implemented? Is it the latest ITF draft, which is currently, I believe, draft 14, and have any custom changes been made to that definition? Has Google coordinated with any other parties to implement the ECH server side? And are Google planning on using anything other than DNS for the ECH configs? Have you or will you be partnering with specific site hosts or CDNs to test ECH? And if so, which ones, that should say? Question I. Any thoughts on interoperability testing? Or any other thoughts on interoperability testing? I think that should read. Has Google experienced any challenges in developing ECH functionality for the browser? Does it plan to allow users to turn ECH on and off? If so, will it be on by default? And that's end users for clarification, as should be clear from the sort of following questions. Noting the importance of SNI data for threat detection, particularly in an enterprise environment, what tools, and if any, will be offered to networks such as enterprise networks that wish to disable ECH for their users? For example, location, enterprise policy, or canary domain, has that been considered as a factor? In some countries, schools and other educational institutions are required to operate effective content filtering. This typically relies on SNI data. Will such establishments be able to disable ECH? Will you be using ECH on your DO lookups? If so, will ECH be attempted for every connection? And then finally, what's your fallback strategy when ECH fails? For example, if a private network operator blocks it, or if it's blocked at firewalls, specifically national firewalls. Clearly, think about the Great Firewall of China as an example. I can see Arno has added one about consideration of ECH impact on enterprise security, which I think is kind of covered by question M, Arno, but yes, as you said, sorry, just reading further down. So appreciate that was a very quick run through, but has that sort of prompted any other thoughts on anything that's sort of been overlooked that should be added? I can see Pat's put in the chat on question C, will determine if other functionality will be rolled into Microsoft Edge, for example. Yes. Yeah, that's kind of what I think that was driving it, Pat, whether if it's being added to Chromium, then presumably it will be available to other browser vendors that use the Chromium code base, as opposed to if it's in Chrome, and therefore sort of proprietary, if you will, to Google's deployment. So that was a thought process with that one, I think. So anything else that anyone believes has been overlooked, or is wrong, for that matter, that doesn't make any sense, that's on the list of questions as worded? Any errors would also be sort of useful to highlight. I'll give you a moment or two just to ponder that. I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment. Yeah, okay, I'll know if you think that question M could be extended. I don't need the words necessarily now, but I do need to send this off to Kenji probably in the next couple of days. So if you've got any additional sort of thoughts or sub questions to add, feel free to send those through to me offline. If that's the case, and anyone else for that matter, if there are any other sort of enterprise specific questions that you think could be added to question M in particular. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else currently in the chat, so let me move on to the second set of questions, which cover Private Prefetch Proxy, hereinafter known as P3, to save me having to fail to pronounce it properly every single attempt. So again, I just run through these in case they're not entirely clear for people, depending on your sort of screen size, etc. So is sort of P3 support being added to Chromium? So same thought process clearly as for ECH. Will sites which attempt to prefetch via so which sites will attempt to prefetch via P3? Will it just be Google services, and if so, are there plans to expand beyond that? How open will the trusted prefetch proxy list be, and how will it be populated? Have the associated technical and policy requirements progressed? Do Google plan to allow other parties to operate the proxies? Will enterprises control the P3 behavior at the endpoint, or will enterprise control of the P3 behavior at the endpoint be possible? Obviously for endpoints on enterprise networks. Will the system be operated in a manner that is compliant with GDPR and e-privacy? For example, can a user or device owner or net administrator require only proxies located within Europe to be used? And that's maybe a topic we'll come back to a bit later on. How can users be sure that the proxy is operating correctly to protect privacy by not introducing new identifiers and by IP blinding all destination origins? Will any prefetched content be treated? So how will any prefetched content be treated for advertising reach? How will cookies of prefetched content be handled? To allow geolocation to work correctly, for example, geofiltering and geoaccess, is the only solution for the website to opt out? Are there any issues relating to split horizon DNS environments, which is quite topical given that it was something we covered a few weeks back on the sort of virtual interim discussion? What are the predictions for increases in network traffic and data center power consumption? I'm not sure if you'll recall this, but Google did have some sort of notes that were circulated previously on P3, which this next question refers to, which is the notes previously circulated on P3 state that publishers can opt out either permanently or temporarily. For example, when dealing with traffic spikes or other issues, can network operators also opt out on the same basis? Have thoughts progressed about implementing oblivious DO and or oblivious HTTP since we last talked about P3? And again, as a reminder, at that point, the notes stated that if either of those proposals gained traction, we may want to revisit the publisher opt-out design to take advantage of oblivious fetching. And then finally, are there plans to support any other recent IETF standards? And that's it for the private prefetch proxy questions. So again, anyone got any sort of thoughts on those? Any additions or omissions? Anything that doesn't make any sense? Or any other comments that anyone wishes to make? Give me a chance to I'll just pause, give you a chance to think about that for a moment and have a quick read through them. So if I give you 2 minutes to work through those quite quickly.
I'll just chime in.
Please, Ralph.
I haven't read that for some time now, but the user has an ability to opt out of this, or is it kind of totally controlled by Google? I mean, we know that a website, but have users have an option for that? Is that in the document? If not, that probably is also a good question.
Okay, yeah, that's a fair point. I can't remember if that was covered last time, so yeah, I can certainly add that. Can the user opt out? Because, well, as you saw, that certainly came up previously for ECH, but I don't think so much for this. So yeah, very fair question. Thank you. Anyone else spotted anything else that could usefully be added? Yeah, I will circulate links to the previous calls that we had on both topics. That's a good point, Pat, just picking up from the chat. So you can sort of listen to either or both of those if that's useful. And if I can find them, I'll also send links to the material that Google previously wrote about both topics. So you got that to refer to. Yeah, good idea on both of those. Just give me another minute, just in case there's anything else that anyone else spots. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'm assuming probably not. Okay, let me then say, if you could, if anyone has any sudden inspiration in the next couple of days, by all means, send me through your thoughts. I aim to get these to Kenji no later than Wednesday, to give him an opportunity to sort of think about the answers, which is obviously quite important, before we have the call next week. So yeah, if you do have any sudden thoughts, please send those through, and as long as I've got it by Wednesday, I'll add them to the list and send them off Wednesday afternoon UK time. Right, let's...
Andrew, just a quick one. Arnaud here.
Sure.
Kenji, you said that Kenji's call is next week at 10 a.m. UTC. Is this correct?
It is, and I will send out an updated invitation for that call.
So that's 11 CET, right?
Yes, so 10 o'clock UTC, 11 o'clock CET, and quite early for anyone in North America. So my apologies for that. I think 5 a.m. East Coast, so 2 a.m. West Coast, which is possibly not so attractive.
Okay.
But I will record it, as I mentioned. But yeah, that's the time.
Blocked. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So a couple of things I thought it'd be useful to highlight from the last week, in case you haven't caught up with them yet. One is Jeff Huston did quite a lengthy article, the sort of post on the APNIC blog on the European Commission's DNS for EU project. So for anyone that has an interest in that, I think, as always, Jeff's thoughts are well worth a read if you have the time. Perhaps even more interestingly, there was a coverage of the recent virtual interim meeting on split DNS in one of the German sites, which is also well worth a read. It is in German, which is no great surprise as it's on a German site, but I think many browsers have excellent auto translation capabilities, so that should prevent anyone from being able to read it, even if you don't speak or read German fluently. I just thought it was worth highlighting as it covered that meeting, so you may find that of interest. And then the other one, which I thought was worth highlighting, was there's been some additional activity in the European courts relating to GDPR and whether or not there's data adequacy, so you can transfer data safely from Europe to the US specifically. This is in the aftermath a year or so ago of the European Court ruling that Privacy Shield wasn't equivalent to GDPR, and therefore you couldn't just rely on it being an equivalent sort of level of protection. And there have been some recent court rulings. The most recent one, which I've highlighted here, was in France. So basically, it effectively means that sort of US tech companies that choose to transfer personal data outside of the EU could face some legal jeopardy. But equally, because of the US Cloud Act, just having personal data on their servers, even if they're within the EU, could potentially place them in some jeopardy. Hence the headlines last week about sort of Facebook and Instagram, I think, potentially being withdrawn from the EU market as a possible worst case scenario, or best case, depending on your point of view, on those services. So for those of you that have an interest more on the policy side, I thought that was worth highlighting. Could well be of interest to you. And Google Fonts, yes, I think that, yes, thank you. I see Pat, I think, has helpfully posted a link about how sort of Google Fonts work, and simply using those because they're served from remote servers, and potentially that also involves transferring personal data from the endpoint to a server. So yeah, these rulings could have some long-term challenges for how a lot of services are currently architected. So it's well worth your while catching up on if you haven't sort of seen this so far. And the Politico article I highlighted might be as good a place to start as any. But certainly the link that Pat's put in is also worth the read. That's one of the other recent court cases that sort of touched on sort of similar ground on this. And then changing tack, the other thing worth highlighting this week, I think I'm right in saying that Nanog is running now. I'm not sure if it's actually started literally yet, but if not, it will be imminent. But other things this week, I'll do them in reverse order on the slide since I mentioned Nanog, which is DNS-OARC, takes place on the 17th. So it follows on immediately after Nanog 84 finishes. It's a hybrid event, so you can attend either online or in person in Austin, and it's the same venue as Nanog. Separate to that, but equally interestingly, arguably more so in many ways, you'll see that Paul Hoffman is giving a talk on quantum computers and how that could affect internet security, and he's giving that talk. I haven't put the date on there, which is on the silly of me. I think that is on Wednesday. It's this week anyway. I'm pretty sure it's on Wednesday afternoon. So if quantum computing is of interest, that's well worth sort of clicking on and registering. It's free to attend. It is Wednesday. Thank you. We'll put that in the chat. That's most helpful. And it's quite timely because I think I read something only this week that someone has sort of got a sort of quantum proof implementation of DNS-SEC. It may be in Infoblox, or I may have imagined that made that announcement, but certainly something earlier this week, or early today even, that I read. So quantum computing is certainly topical currently, so that could be a useful event to join on Wednesday.
Sorry, Andrew, I
Sure.
could not understand that. So someone is claiming that DNS-SEC is quantum resistant?
Let me call up on my screen. You won't be able to see this for a moment, just to refresh my own memory briefly of the details of that.
That would be surprising.
Sorry, completely misremembered who it was. It's Power DNS. So I don't know if Vittoria is on the call. Some of his colleagues in the Power DNS team have done a proof of concept implementation using Fulcrum 512 as a DNSSEC signature algorithm in Power DNS. Yeah, which let me I'll post that myself in the chat. Anyone that's interested in that, you can sort of read the relevant article at your leisure. But it's Power DNS.
Okay.
Peter, I think it was, Peter Thomason who published that, which caught my eye earlier on today. Sorry for not quite explaining that correctly, but got there in the end.
No problem.
Okay, and then the other thing that I had just to run through, we covered DNS over quick last Monday. And as I think I mentioned at the time, we're going to revisit that topic at the end of this month. And Andrei Meshkov, the CTO at AdGuard, is going to join us to share some of their experiences of deploying both the resolver and a lot of the client software, sort of various types, but also Mike Kosek and colleagues from Cornell published a paper taking a further look at DNS over quick and doing some performance measurements, and that attracted a little bit of attention on, I think it was on the Deprive mailing list. So Mike and possibly some of his co-authors will be joining that call as well. I think it's quite helpful because performance measurement did come up on a call last Monday. I think it'd be interesting to see what Mike and co can also share that might be pertinent on the topic. So they'll be on the call as well alongside Andre. In between times, there was a very interesting paper published a few weeks back measuring the performance of DOE, and its author, one of its co-authors, Rishbab Chabra, is going to join us on the 14th to sort of talk about, sorry, not the 14th, because that's today. Sorry, 14th of March even, to talk about the sort of performance of DOE based on a paper that he and colleagues recently published. So a bit more on the sort of performance measurement, but this time focused on DOE rather than DOC. And then a couple of other topics that we're due to cover, which I haven't sort of lined up speakers for yet. One is to revisit sort of DOE deployment experiences with some of the resolver operators. So those of you on the call that have DOE resolvers operating, if you'd like to be involved in that, to share your experiences, maybe drop me a line separately and let me know, and I'll sort out a mutually convenient time to schedule that in. Also MASK, which came up a few weeks back, could we cover MASK? I think I said on the call last week, David Shinatsi from Google isn't able to do that. So if anyone has any bright ideas as to other potential speakers, then again, do get in touch on that. I'm working on someone to talk about the impact of DOE on threat detection. Again, there'll be some sort of recent papers on that, so we'll be looking to see if we can talk some more about that. And then got the sort of the long-standing, can we get someone from the Android team to talk about how they will be supported in Android 13, as well as, I think, after session with Kenji. I think we'll have a follow-up session on ECH more generally, beyond just the support within Chrome. So those will be topics coming up over the next few weeks. But that's probably more than enough from me this week. So just like we did sort of last week, I just want to pause and see if what other news or general updates anyone else may have that they would wish to share. So let me stop talking and indeed stop sharing and just see what other topics people might wish to update others on. And if nothing else, it will then remove Brett's forehead from the screen. So, anyone got anything else that you would like to raise this week? And yeah, as normal, just sort of raise your virtual hand, put something in the chat, whichever is easier. Not seeing any hands raised at the moment.
Andrew, yeah, is there a question for you regarding the ECH in the ECH story? So right now there is no agenda for IETF. For IETF 113, but do we have a feel or is there any indication when ECH will be discussed the week of IETF 113, or we just need to wait?
I've not seen anything, unless it's come out today, to be fair. I've not seen even a draft agenda yet for the Vienna session. I don't know if anybody else has. It's probably getting close to the time when the draft would normally be published, but I've not seen it yet. Actually, it may be slightly early for the draft, thinking about it, as we're just over a month away from the meeting, but it should be coming up fairly soon. I know, I think last week, confirmation was given of the start time, which I think is 10 a.m. local time for the sessions. Running through to, I think it was around 6 p.m. local time, which allowed sort of time for refreshment breaks for those people who will be present in person in Vienna. So a longer day than has been the case for the fully virtual meetings over the last couple of years. But unless anyone says differently, I don't believe there's been anything yet on the actual agenda itself other than the timings.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anyone jumping in, and given this is quite a knowledgeable audience when it comes to IETF, that almost certainly means it hasn't been published yet, Arno.
Okay. Okay. No, it's difficult to.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's out. It's the preliminary agenda is out on Friday.
Yeah, the 18th.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that will be subject to change at that point. I think that at that point it gives an indication what sessions there will be and a first cut timing. But I know last time there was a reasonable amount of movement from the draft agenda, and I think it's 2 weeks later when it was finalised. But once that's out, you get an indication of what sessions should be included on the final agenda, even if the timings are still a little bit fluid.
Okay, so if your employer is only giving you a chance for 1 day in IETF, you have to play dice.
Yes, or wait until until the agenda is firmed up, and then just hope that several different sessions you're interested in happen to align on the same day. Right. And of course, even though the sessions will be clearer, then the actual agenda for the individual sessions will be, I think, a couple of weeks beyond that before they're firmed up.
I might have someone for you to speak about deploying a die resolver, by the way.
Sorry, can you say that again, Peter?
Might have someone to speak about deploying a DOE resolver. By the way.
Okay, fantastic.
I'll follow up offline about that.
Yeah, please. I'll just make a note of that so I don't forget. Yeah, and I think I saw another.
Sorry, just
no,
put my hand up.
that's okay.
That's okay.
I think I saw a comment in the chat to that effect as well. So yeah, anybody else, just get in touch and let me know, and I'll sort out a panel discussion probably for that to make it a bit more interesting and interactive. Simon, I see you've raised your virtual hand.
Thanks. How are people seeing the sort of mixed virtual physical? I'm expecting most people to be physical, or a bit 50-50, or what's the expectation, please?
When I last looked at the registration details, I think it was about 220 people had registered to attend in person, and was it about 500 were registered to attend virtually? Something like that. That was at the weekend, Simon, so it may have changed slightly since. Although I believe, as somebody pointed out on the call last week, once you've registered, if you got the early bird tier, you can retain the tier and swap between in-person and virtual should circumstances change. And the wording was slightly ambiguous on the FAQs, but it would appear you could change in either direction, so people could move from virtual to in-person and vice versa nearer the time, once the sort of local situation is clearer. But currently it's roughly, I think it was 225, something like that, were in person, roughly 500. So about 1/3, 2/3 split currently.
And on that basis, as you're saying, retain the cost on the basis on which they'd originally booked.
Yeah. So if you move from virtual to in person, then as I understand it, you can still get the early bird rate, assuming that you're qualified for the early bird rate for.
Yeah. So I, for example, holding a virtual could, in theory, move to a physical on the early bird rate if I so wished at a later date.
That was my interpretation of the FAQ. So obviously do check that with the organisers if that becomes important. I think the standard rate. Sorry, Simon.
Well, I was just saying I'm virtual for other reasons because I need it to be able to do things in the UK anyway. So.
All right. I think I'm saying right in saying that the standard rate runs through to something like the 7th of March. So if anyone that hasn't registered already for the early bird rate, the next increase is, I think, 7th of March. So you've got a little while now before the increase kicks in. But it will be good to have a decent number of people actually in Vienna for those of you able to travel. It'd be nice to have an in-person event after all this time. And I'm guessing that working group chairs that aren't able to attend in person might be looking for willing volunteers to help them in the room in Vienna if they're not there in person themselves. Okay, anything else anyone else wanted to raise this week? Don't think I'm seeing anything else in the chat. In which case, as we discussed, I will send you out a revised invitation for next Monday, remembering that will be at 10 a.m. UTC. If you want to be live on the call with Kenji. And in the meantime, do please, if you've got any additional questions to add to the list, please send those to me, and I'll make sure those are included before I send them off to Kenji on Wednesday. And other than that, thanks everyone for your time this week. Have a fantastic week, and look forward to seeing you on the call with Kenji 10 a.m. UTC next Monday. So have a brilliant week, everyone. Bye all.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.